You are listening to Ice Cream for Breakfast with your hosts Tara Chase and Kevin Hansen.
Okay, welcome to. I hope everybody had breakfast today. Raise your hand. None of our listeners will even see if you raise your hand or not. But this is our podcast show called Ice Cream Before Breakfast, because that's how we roll.
Did you see the email I sent you about Jacques Pepin?
I did.
Do you guys know who Jacques Pepin is? He's a French chef. He has a TV show. He's an older guy. He made French toast with melted ice cream. So he just takes the bread and cooks it.
That's legit.
That is real ice cream at breakfast. So we figured got to have everything backwards every once in a while. We'll stay on the A to B to Z. Otherwise, we're L, N, add a T, go to A, then back over to P or something. So we're here. We have an amazing guest that I'm going to turn over to Kevin to introduce them tonight, because we've all eaten breakfast earlier this morning.
I didn't actually. So
Kevin's on a little bit of a...
Yeah,
Can we share your breakfast of champions?
It's the carnivore breakfast.
Carnivore breakfast.
It's eggs, it's bacon, it's sausage, it's fat, it's crazy. That's what it is.
But that's kind of real breakfast food.
Yeah, it is. They don't make any Fruity Pebbles that way, though.
No doubt. They should.
So we have in studio today Joel Hillier. And Joel and I met, and his wife Holly, thanks for coming. We met at some events where he was part of a choir, and I was there for technical support. And I think the more I talked to Joel, the more I liked him. Not that I didn't like him in the beginning, but I just found him very interesting. And then looking at his resume was even more impressive. So we thought we'd have him come in and talk. And
okay. Yeah, I'm looking, Joel, at your qualifications list, and both Kevin and I are quite impressed. And we're excited to have you here. We want to introduce you to that you are, you live in Boise?
I do.
Okay. And you'll notice his Boisean accent.
Yep, it's easily detectable as a fake Boise accent.
A fake Boise. I said to him...
Are you from California?
Can I borrow that? So we'll be excited to hear more about where you're from and share some of your insight with us of where you've been, where you're going, and we're excited that you're both here.
So Joel has a company, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a consulting company, so you work with businesses and startups and tech and all kinds of stuff, and he's spoke all over the world, has a number of different topics that we could talk to, and we either are going to be here for like 14 hours tonight, or we're just going to have to skim over.
You might fall asleep.
Going to have to skim over some of the stuff. So Joel, thanks for coming, and Holly. You're going to talk at some point in this, I promise.
Holly's talking. Her mic is off.
So tell us about life in Australia and maybe what it was like just growing up there, and what kind of started you on the path of where you are now.
Sure. Life in Australia, awesome, honestly. I feel like I had a pretty idyllic childhood. I lived in Brisbane, where I was born, up until I was 3. Then my family moved to Victoria to live in Melbourne. And I lived there for 6 years and started my schooling down there, then moved back to Brisbane, and I was there until I left at the age of 19 to serve a full-time mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And as a missionary, I got sent to Sydney. So I lived in Sydney for a couple of years, and then afterwards I also moved back to Sydney and lived there for another 3 years. So I've lived in all the major eastern seaboard cities. And Brisbane is where I've lived the longest, and it's a subtropical place, so the average temperature there is between probably 65 Fahrenheit and 85 most of the year round. It does get hotter, obviously, in the summer times, but I could go to the beach in the middle of winter and still get a tan. So I think that's pretty cool.
I do too. We're January 14th in the middle of Boise, Idaho winter, and that sounds just about nice right now.
Well, it's summertime down there, so it's kind of, I was saying to Holly the other day, I was looking at my hand and I'm going, this is the first time in my life where my hand has been the same color on both sides.
Hey, that's a good check. Oh, mine too. What about yours, Kevin?
I've still got a little bit of watch tan, but I'm hoping for some more of that to come back soon.
When do we need to leave? I'll look up the plane tickets, you guys. Wow.
So when you were in school, what were your interests? What were the things that you enjoyed about school?
So I was a failure at school, to be honest. I failed school miserably, and I ended up going back and repeating my senior year after taking a year off and working. I started my working life as a clown and a burger flipper, and I really didn't amount to a whole lot. I had a bunch of entrepreneurial interests, actually. My first business was at 9 years old, and my sister and I would sell paintings door to door that my dad had left over from an art shop that he'd managed when we lived in Victoria. So we'd moved back to Brisbane and had all these paintings left over. So my sister and I would go door to door, but my dad would drop us off at the beginning of a street and he'd let us walk down, and he said, now this is what you've got to say.
Oh,
and this is where I
script.
learned my sales pitching. He said, at the door, when someone opens the door, you say, my dad said that if you dare to look at these paintings, you won't be able to resist buying at least one or two of them. And we
Good coaching.
We sold all the paintings.
No way, it worked.
And he let us keep all the money too, which was really kind of handy. So
I hope so.
made
That's
hundreds of
all
dollars
the effort is walking and knocking.
holding these big paintings when you're a
Oh, and
small
they're
child.
large
So,
paintings.
yeah.
Were they like expensive, or like how, like what was the price
Canvas?
point?
They
Like,
were
kinda reasonable.
on a board, so they were backed already, so they weren't just canvas rolled up. It was
Yeah.
paintings that you had to hold and that you could just immediately frame, and they were imported from China, so they weren't particularly expensive. Some of them were copies of more famous paintings, but we had a great time selling paintings and making money as 9 and 10-year-olds.
Did your dad paint the paintings?
Well, no, he didn't, but later in his
Oh.
life he decided that he wanted to be an artist, so he
Okay.
took up painting and he actually became quite good at it.
Wow.
So
So he owned a like a print shop or a frame shop or something.
yeah, an art shop, just a little suburban art gallery, and people would go in there and buy paintings and get frames done and things like that. So
That
he was a
is
salesman.
fascinating.
He sold many different things throughout his life, and he was very good as a salesperson. But the thing that probably I enjoyed most about my dad, he was an actor and a trained opera singer. So my home was always filled with music because my mother's a music teacher and a school teacher, and my dad sang opera, and so we always had lots of musical experiences, and he was in shows all over the place, and he did some fun things, and I got to be dragged along as part of that. So when I was at school, you asked about school before, I was more into the humanities, so I did speech and drama, and I did theatre and home economics kinds of things, and I didn't really perform well. Holly here is a scientist, she's a pharmacist, and when I did science in year 8, my first year of high school, I got 29% as my score at the end of the year. That was the end of my scientific career.
You're like, Holly, make up the difference. Make up the difference.
That's
Sounds
right.
about right with me in geometry.
You and Gio.
We didn't go. I decided once the numbers started going into math equations, I was done at that point.
I think a lot of it being that I was a teacher for a long time, you have to capture what your kids are ready for and how they learn. And it is so different. And if we could only tap into that, we would find like you're successful in a different kind of way. And school is so monotony. And yes, you get a little fluctuant when you get some flexibility of choosing a class that you enjoy or you like. But for some of those classes of no interest to someone, and then you might put a teacher with a different personality than you, and it's not going to work out. So I am impressed by even you admitting that, but also you just learned in a different way. So
I did, and some of it was by truancy. I took year 11 economics for 2 weeks. And my friend Tiffany and I decided that economics is not for us either. So we ditched class for the rest of the whole year. We had the senior mistress chasing us literally around the school trying to find us.
Oh, goodness.
Climbing trees, and she'd run along underneath and she wouldn't see us. All sorts of fun things. But yes, I wasn't really good at school is the short answer to that. So the fact that I'm doing a PhD now is quite remarkable.
I bet you could send your teacher into spins. Like, this is how I learn. This is the way you're going to get my PhD thesis and dissertations. Very cool.
So did you go to university before your mission, or was that something you...
No, I wasn't smart enough. I didn't make the grades to get into university. So, yeah, I did. I just did really menial jobs before I went as a missionary. And things like being a car detailer and that kind of thing. And after a mission, I came home and I got married pretty quickly, like 8 weeks after I finished my mission. And so I learned very quickly that I needed some education to be able to make some actual income. So I went to school and studied undergraduate accounting or business degree with an accounting major. And that started my academic career. So by the time I was 30, I'd finished my undergraduate and a master's degree, which again was, in my opinion, quite remarkable for someone that didn't do so well at school. So
even doing so well in school, that's a remarkable accomplishment.
Well, getting to be educated was something that I thought was important, and I needed to have it in order to succeed at the sorts of things that I wanted to do. And I went from, essentially starting out as a clown juggling balls to studying accounting and juggling books and people's finances. So it was a bit of a 180 in that sense.
So when you started university, did you have a career goal? Was there something you thought, this is what I want to do when I'm done?
Yeah, I had 6 of them. So, and it was, when I was in high school, I thought I'd love to be an actor. Because I'd seen that with my dad and being on stage myself during school years. I enjoyed that experience. And then I realised that probably doesn't take you into really good worlds. If you want to be a family person or have some stability in life, and the kind of lifestyle that people in that world typically end up with is not one that's conducive with what I was being taught and what I believe. So that changed, and I thought maybe I'll be a chef because I loved to cook. And then I did work experience at a big entertainment centre for about 2 weeks, and very quickly learned that the chefs are in the kitchen when everyone's out having fun, and they're there till all hours of the night and the morning. And that's really hard work, and they're making the food that everyone's going to eat, and they're not eating the food that everyone wants to eat. And so you go, oh no, that's not a very sociable lifestyle either. So then I thought maybe I could be an early childhood educator because I really liked children, and that's not a suitable career for a man, so that didn't kind of work out either. And it wasn't until after being a missionary I realised that I did have a reasonable people manner and working with individuals to help them through things. I thought maybe I could be in HR, and I applied for a course in human resource management. But then a friend of my family said, actually that's a really bad idea. He said, why don't you study business instead, which includes elements of human resource management, and then you've got a much broader field of opportunities if you don't like HR. And so I took that advice and changed my application and got accepted into an undergraduate accounting qualification, which was actually a life-saving thing. So that's how I ended up in that world doing business, and it checked out. I mean, his advice was solid. So I got the chance about 25 years later to go back and visit with that man and just say, hey, about that conversation we had when I was a 21-year-old, thank you so much for that. It's actually impacted my life in so many positive ways. And so it was a good full circle moment to give kudos to someone for something that helped shape my life.
And did he remember that conversation?
He did. He's an accountant, and so he remembers lots of things.
He's like, I won't forget the details.
No.
That's impressive.
There was a guy I met when I first got married, and he told me to go be a pharmacist. I was like, we know how that turned out. But no, I'm not that smart. I'm not that smart.
Pharmacy, it's not that hard, is it, Holly?
No, count by fives.
Count by fives. There you go.
I think there's a lot more involved to get to that point.
There is. Yes, there is. And you're in high demand.
Indeed.
That job, high demand.
So you started working for a company. Did you kind of go on your own at some point?
Yeah, I started out with... actually, this is kind of a funny full circle moment again if I think about it now, and it's only just occurred to me. But I started out working for that man who gave me the advice. He said, if you change your preference, I'll give you a job in my suburban accounting practice. And then that meant that I got to study full time, and then whatever other time I had available, not in classes, I would go work for him.
Did you say suburban?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a regular CPA firm.
Okay.
And so I worked with him for about a year and just over a year. And then I got an opportunity to work in Sydney, which is what took me back to Sydney again for another 3 years. And I worked for New Skin.
Oh,
which American company.
Is it in Utah, Salt Lake?
Provo.
Headquarters?
Provo.
Oh, in Provo. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard of them.
Which is kind of funny because that's where Holly and I met.
Is Provo.
Right next door to that
To the
New
New
Skin
Skin
headquarters in
You
Provo.
guys are New Skin.
Indeed.
A New Skin, new dating, and met.
It's kind of interesting. But anyway,
Okay.
I did work for New Skin for a few years in Sydney.
Okay.
And during that time, I got to learn about systems accounting. So I didn't really like the monthly accounts, the drudgery of doing the same thing for month-end accounting. And so I learned all the technology side of things and how accounting systems operate. And then I became a trainer and a facilitator of implementation projects with technology. And so I still used accounting basics, but I didn't be an accountant anymore. I became a systems accountant, and that meant that I got into analysis and learned that actually I don't have a bad analytical brain, despite what I learned at school being a failure. And so all of those things led me into projects, and I really like process. And so I like to see how we can optimize a process and make it so that it works more efficiently and effectively. And so that became a focus of my career, and I ended up studying what they call Six Sigma, which is all about statistical process control, so measures of standard deviation from the norm. And I really enjoyed that, and I managed a team of people in a large banking and financial services institution, and did projects, and learned that if you fix the process, then you can reduce the variability, which means the process is not inefficient and doesn't cost the organisation more money. And so all of those kinds of optimising things started to percolate in my brain, and in my career became more evident as a way that I would move forward. So ultimately that led me into the world of procurement, which again is all about how do we buy something expensive that needs to be negotiated in a certain way. And so all the creativity part that I like was able to be channeled into the procurement function, where you have to figure out what's the best specification for something, what's the best way to buy something that's complicated and expensive that often doesn't exist in the real world yet. Like, you know, we've got to build a train set, or we've got to build a station or a depot for managing something, or we've got to build some technology and it's got to do these certain functions. So how do we gather all that information, turn it into something that we can release to a market that we can then negotiate with people who want to offer it to us? And so I did procurement for quite a few years, and I learned that skill with some very excellent people. I worked with the biggest consulting companies in the world in that function, and that gave me lots of really interesting opportunities. And that's essentially where I've stayed ever since, is in a consulting role, working with companies to do big projects, which typically have a procurement function as part of it, where you've got to spend the money on something and negotiate with a supplier and then implement something, get a team together and build whatever it is that has been purchased. So I've done a lot of those projects, and so as a consultant, what I do now is work with companies who want to optimize how they operate and become more profitable. And so that means I work with mature companies as well as with startups. And I'm finding myself more and more involved in AI tech. And I'm now a board member and a shareholder in a couple of AI technology companies, one based in Pakistan and the other one in Baltimore, Maryland. So yeah, it's been really interesting progression from that business base back in the day to working with hundreds of organisations all over the world on mergers and acquisitions and startups and all sorts of things.
How do you feel about AI? Like, because there's parts of it that to me feel like they're awesome, and then there's parts of me that I think, oh, this could be the end of the world.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a lot of people feel the same way.
Yes, I agree.
And if you were anywhere near the Consumer Electronics show in Las Vegas in the last few days, you would have seen some pretty sketchy things, as well as some incredibly amazing things. And I mean, I personally am fully invested in AI as a platform for building efficiency into organisations, because companies now, if they don't adopt AI technologies, they're not going to survive. That's just a fact of it. And people go, well, what does it do for me? Well, it does anything that you want, almost anything that you want. And so the startups that I'm working with, one of them's about 3D scanning technology. And so they can take a photograph or a text prompt in ChatGPT or a video and turn that into a 3D model that you can use to build something. And that has application in construction and real estate, has application in healthcare for surgical implants, it has application for retail where you want to virtually try on a pair of pants or some shoes, any number of things. And it's a huge market, it's billions of dollars. The other one is all about research and how do we do research more effectively, because at the moment you have a research assistant who gets a budget to spend on doing research, and they have to then go and recruit some survey participants. And so this AI tech that we're working with there, it automates a lot of those things and uses virtual assistants, and it can translate into multiple languages, so you don't need to have people that are multilingual. And it's a cost-saving device because it allows organisations to have the same budget but do a lot more research with that budget. So there's lots of very interesting, fascinating things out there. And I love
technology at your fingertips, literally.
Oh, for sure. But there's ridiculous things like the virtual companion. Oh, sorry, not a virtual a robotic companion.
Yes, I've heard these things.
What do you have against that, by the way?
Well, each to their own, Kevin, I think.
Gotta get home. I got an hour.
Yeah, she doesn't care about the time. She's available 24/7.
That's crazy.
I will tell you. Can I tell you a funny story?
Please.
So when I started writing books, I initially started trying to write a screenplay. I had no idea how to format a screenplay, and then just started writing a book. And so I've always wanted that first book and all of them to be screenplays. And it was 2 days before Christmas this last year, I saw this ad for an AI writing tool. And I was like, how is this going to write a book for me? So I downloaded it just to check it out. And it said, convert your book to a screenplay. And I was like, there's no way. So I imported my book and hit right click, convert to screenplay. 10 seconds later.
You had a screenplay in 10 seconds?
Yeah. And it's not perfect.
Right.
There's a lot to change, and but it really just it analyzes where you're telling the story. It's dark, it's at night, it's exterior, it's interior, it's in the real estate office. And then it goes through and it's pretty insane.
It's fascinating what you can do with technology, and I use it for family history things now. And so that's a really fun thing that I use it for personally as well as professionally.
Yeah, how do you use it for family history? I'm curious. And if Holly wants to add to this part, so it looks like she might be experienced in this as well, just from your face.
Holly's a Wonder Woman. So
yes.
What I do, I like stories as well. So that's something that's part of my makeup for whatever reason. I just love stories. I loved them as a child. My mother would read them to me before I go to bed, and I developed a love of reading stories, and now I'm trying to write my own stories. So I'm writing. I've got a family history project that I'm working on at the moment. It's a Christian version of a Haggadah, and a Haggadah is the Jewish text that they use to facilitate a Passover. And so every year a Jewish family will do Passover if they're observant, and actually most liberal Jews will do it as well. But my family, because my mother is Jewish, converted to Christianity before I was born, but ever since I was born, we've always done Passover every year. And so I grew up with this Jewish tradition in my home, which has, again, shaped my life, and my love of family history. It probably stems from my parents, because my dad at one point had a family history business as well and was a great family historian. My mother and him have done thousands and thousands of hours of research and collected tens of thousands of names. So I have grown into that myself and sort of developed it in a different way from them. But this book that I'm trying to write at the moment as a gift for my family is a Christian version of the Haggadah, because the Christian tradition obviously believes in the Old Testament, and that story of the Jews or the Israelites release from Pharaoh's harsh hand and their escape into the wilderness and eventually into the Promised Land. It's a story that it's told over and over every year to remind us that we need to leave an Egypt of some sort behind. We need to leave behind something in our life that we shouldn't have, or that we shouldn't be involved in. And whatever bondage we're in, or captivity we feel we're in, whether it's a habit or a relationship or whatever it is, we need to exodus that and have that experience where we go into a wilderness place, spiritually or physically or both, preferably both, and we come to know God. And then we rely on him, and we get to the edge of a Red Sea, which is an impossible obstacle, and we've got an army of Egyptians following behind, and we go, I have nowhere to go. I can't go forwards and I can't go backwards. I'm stuck, and the only person I can rely on is God. And how will he help me? I can't see a way, because my brain doesn't understand what he's capable of. But then he opens the sea and says, you go forward. I've made a way for you, and you know that it's me because you couldn't have done that yourself. And so what I'm trying to do with this book is to take that text, which is the story of the Exodus, and to add in the elements of Christianity, where we understand those things as being symbolic of being led by a Saviour, Jesus Christ, to a place that's better for us than where we were. And so I'm using original text from a Haggadah and interpolating into that Christian elements and quotes from prophets of modern day rather than just from Moses, and also including in that my experience. So my grandparents are Nazi refugees. 45 of my family were killed in concentration camps, and my grandparents managed to escape that, even though they'd been taken 3 times by the Gestapo. And so I've got an Exodus experience with my grandparents.
Right.
And then I've got my own parents who left a life that was not Christian based and became members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so they left their Egypt of their former life and became new creatures and sort of moved forward in a different way. And then I have my own experience of leaving my home country and moving to a new country. And so there's all these different layers of Exodus story that I'm weaving into this Haggadah experience that you usually share at a Passover time. And so that's my little family history project. I'm using AI to help me craft some of the content to that, to structure it properly and to extract some of the open source Haggadah texts from reputable sources.
Well, whatever you just said, you don't need AI. That was touching. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for doing that. That's a good project. We all could read your family history.
So where were your mother? Where was her family from? And did your dad, was he Australian, or his family Australian, or did he move there?
Yeah, so my father is Australian, my mother's Australian. My mother's parents were, her dad is a Hungarian Jew and her mum is a German Jew. And her sister was born in Germany before the war, and then they moved in 1938 to live in Australia. And so my mum was born in 1942. My dad was born in 38 and he's born in Brisbane, and his family on his father's side is all from the UK, so England and Ireland and Scotland, and on his mother's side they're from Germany. So I have German ancestry on both sides, and so part of my family history research is to be going to places of family origin. So I've travelled quite extensively through Europe, where a lot of my family came from, and had some fascinating family history experiences, including here in the US actually. So yeah, some miraculous things. So yeah, I have a European heritage on both sides, and it's interesting to me because a lot of the things that I appreciate about my life I can link back to parts of my mum's parents and my dad's parents.
Is there any of those stories you'd want to share?
Oh, how long do you have? I have so many. It's actually, it surprised me how many happened. In 2017, my dad passed away, and he was 78. And he passed away in March, on the 31st of March. And then later in April, I took a world trip. I went for 7 weeks, nearly travelled around the world. And with this express purpose of doing family history research and just exploring some wild places, because I'm a trail runner and among other things, and so I had a few purposes, but my principal purpose was to go and to explore my family of origin and to visit people in my family tree who I'd never met, and to go to places where my family had come from in the US and in Europe. So the very first day that I got into the United States, it was a Sunday, and I'd arranged to meet some cousins who live in the Palisades area, actually. So their house is burnt down now. They've moved to Nashville, but another cousin, their house burnt down just in this last week. So these are people who are, I call them cousins, but they're not first cousins. They're older people, and they're my mum's side, so they're Jewish relatives. So I got to LA the first night. I had arranged to have dinner with one of these cousins, and her name is Julie Corner, her maiden name, and her husband Steve Greenberg. So Julie and Steve, I get to their house and I knock on the door, and Julie opens the door and she looks at me, and I introduce myself, and she looks and says, "So how are we related again?" And so I go, "Well, the guy that connects our families is a man named Nathan Kona." And she goes, "Wait." And I go, "Okay, I'm still standing in the doorstep." And she goes to a room just next to the entry, and she comes back with a big framed photograph and says, "Do you know who this is?" I have no idea. And she says, "This is Nathan Kona." And I go, "Well, he's the guy that connects me and you together." She says, "Do you know how I got this photo?" I don't. She says, "Well, 2 days ago, I was at another cousin's house clearing out the house because the mother had died, and my cousin said to me, 'Julie, I think you should have this photo.'" And she says, "Who is that?" And he says, "It's Nathan Kona." "Well, why do I need it?" "I don't know, but I think you should have it."
Wow.
So she took it and put it in the room in the front
She knew
foyer.
exactly where it was at.
And 2 days later, I show up and I say, "This is the guy," and she goes, "Don't you find that remarkable?"
Yes.
And I go, "Well, actually, probably not really." But from that moment,
It's your legacy.
I got to see how, and this is how I view it, I think how God weaves a tapestry for us that's so connected. He can see it, but we can't see it. But every so often he lets us get a glimpse and to see, I've prepared this for your arrival, and I want you to know that I'm part of what you're doing. And so when Julie, who's obviously a Jewish woman, comes to the door and says, "How are we related?" and I say Nathan Kono, and within 3 minutes of being there, she's got a photo of him that she only got 2 days ago that she'd never really knew existed. And I find that to be remarkable.
We call those the tender mercies.
Yeah, and that was the first of many. And perhaps I can share another one. I visited a cousin in DC. He lives just across the Potomac in Virginia, but he works in DC anyway. He is a family historian. He's a young man, so he was back then, I think, 28 or 29 years old, and had a wife and also a Jewish man. And he knew that I was going to Europe, and he says, "Oh, are you going to the Czech Republic at all?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to Prague." "Well, do you think you could go and do a couple of things for me while you're there?" I said, "Sure." So he asked for me to go to these archives, which I did, but there was a particular cemetery that he wanted a headstone, the details on a headstone from. He said, "Do you think you might be able to go to that cemetery?" I said, "Where is that?" And he said, "Oh, it's in a little town called Horojnetin," which is what it's called now. It used to be called Liechtenstein when it was in the sort of German, Austrian kind of area, but it's now called Horojnetin. And he said there's an old Jewish cemetery there, and in there is a headstone for one of the people in our family that connects us. And he said, "I need the details on that headstone. I know it's there, but I don't know what's on it. So could you go to that cemetery?" I go, "Well, I'll figure it out." And it's about 2 hours drive out of Prague. So I go, "Yeah, I guess I could rent a car and go do it." So that's what I did. And I mean, there were some other experiences with the archives, which I won't tell you about now, but I drive to this place and I drive through this town, and it's the sleepiest little thing you've ever seen. I got a little video of me driving through it because I was so amused by the fact that I didn't see practically anybody. And I couldn't see any signs for a cemetery. So I stop at a little corner store and I walk in there and I ask the shopkeeper, "Does he speak English?" "No." "And he says, "But there's a man standing out there, he will speak English." So I go out there and I start to speak to this guy and I'm saying, "I'm looking for a cemetery." "Oh," and his English wasn't that good. So I got Google Translate and I'm saying, "I need to find this cemetery. It's a Jewish cemetery." And he says, "Okay," and he speaks in Czech and he translates it back and he tells me it's up there, and he points and I'm looking and there's a forest. He goes, "It's up there." And so he says, "You have to go down to this end of this street, there's a roundabout, go up there, and if you get to the next town, you've gone too far." I go, "Okay, it's off to the right in the forest." Okay. So I drive and I get to the next town and I've gone too far. And then I'm driving back and I go and I see a lady walking along the side of the street with her grandmother in a wheelchair, and I stop and ask these ladies, "English?" "Oh, a little bit." So I'm looking for this cemetery. "Oh, yeah. You have to go down here and it's off in the left. And if you get to a hotel with bikes leaning on the fence, then you've gone too far." I go, "Okay." So I'm driving down, looking. I couldn't see any streets, and there's a train track there and no cemetery.
Wow.
And then I park my car and I see this guy working in his yard. I said, "I'm going to try one more time."
Third time's the charm.
And so I walk up to this man and he comes over and I said, "English? No." "How about German?" "No." "A little bit German." "Okay." And he says, "Czech?" "No." So I try Google Translate out of internet range. So he gets a stick and he draws in the ground. We're sort of speaking little bits of German together, and he draws the train track. He says, Zug, you know Zug? Yes, train. Okay, and he does his fingers walking on this little map of the train track. I go, I walk on the train track? Yes. And he says, right. And so he draws a line off to the right. Somewhere in the Wald, in the forest, yep, there's the cemetery, Friedhof there. I go, oh, I have to walk on the train tracks and look for a track, and then
I'm
walk
in a
up in there.
strange town and people are directing me in different places to the forest. Okay.
So I eventually get to this forest.
Okay.
I walk on the train track and I videoed this little thing because it was so entertaining to me. And I said, Josh, this is for you. This better work. I mean, if I end up like Peter and the Wolf and
Hansel and Gretel.
something.
Exactly.
Anyway, there's this cemetery in the middle of the forest with a wall and a gate, and it's locked and it hasn't been used for 100 years. And so I climb the wall and I go, well, the headstones are all in a foreign language.
Oh, right.
They're in either Hebrew or in German. And I go, oh, I'm not going to be able to read them anyway. So I thought, I've got my
Video
phone.
all of it.
So I photographed using a little app called Billion Graves.
Okay.
I photographed 145 headstones, any headstone that I could find, and I lifted some up and then now there's a record of that cemetery on Billion Graves. And I sent my cousin Josh. I said, I did the pictures, you've now got to do the translation. So, but that was a really fun experience to just go there and to feel connected to people who are long gone, but just this sense of respect for what they had been through. And if you know any of the history of the Jews through the centuries, they've always had to live in little enclaves separate from society because they were always
Ostracized.
and they were persecuted for centuries. And so knowing that meant that I felt kind of a little bit more compassion and connected, and just felt such a sense of reverence for, even though they haven't received the Saviour Jesus Christ yet, but they preserved things that us as Christians today enjoy the benefit of, that without their sacrifice we wouldn't have. So
So Joel, was that cemetery, I just have to ask, first of all, did your cousin find what he wanted?
He did, and it was an 800-year-old connection.
And so your video picked it up.
Well, I didn't take a video of me walking in the cemetery, all the headstones, but I photographed each headstone, and from the photographs he was able to identify the one that he needed.
You're on the Lord's errand.
Indeed.
And then that cemetery was specifically for a Jewish
It's just a Jewish cemetery. Yeah.
Covered up by a wall.
Yeah, and surrounded by a forest. And if I showed you a picture of it, you go like,
Yes.
I can't even see a cemetery there at all.
Wow.
You have to walk through the forest to find it. Yeah.
Well,
So I wondered how they got the people there to bury them.
145-ish people and their families.
Yeah.
Maybe for... Wow, that's outstanding. And thank you for taking your time to do that.
Oh.
Because a lot of people would have just, no, I have other things to go visit. Including, maybe that's why he didn't go to Belgium. Was there a reason you didn't go to Belgium?
Yes.
Okay.
I ended up in the US instead.
Okay.
So I was planning to go to Belgium.
At the travel list, and I don't see.
She was
Belgium.
born in Belgium, so she's a little.
So my family
questioning why
is
you wouldn't go there.
German, and I've got Swedish, and anyway, so I'm like, Belgium's not on there, Joel.
No, it was on there, but I
Okay.
ended up coming to the US, and which is where Holly and I
He's
met.
pointing to Holly, so it's your fault,
Yeah.
Holly. I guess we'll all have to go to Belgium.
Have you seen the movie Defiance? It's a Daniel Craig movie. So I think they're Polish Jews. And
Yes, I have
go
seen that.
And they live in the forest.
Yes,
And that is a fascinating story.
it is. It
Kevin, is that a true story?
Yes.
It's a true story. And
I
they
should see
bring all of these Jewish people and they hide in the forest.
For safety?
And they live there for a few
Quite
years.
a while. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a remarkable story.
I'm
Actually,
trying to remember his name was I think it starts with a W, but yeah, it's a very interesting movie. Yeah.
Okay. I put it on my...
I have had the same need or desire to find people, and I'm for some reason I'm one person specifically I'm just drawn to, and that's my grandmother. And my birth father who died before my mother knew she was pregnant. His story is interesting, but it's his mother for some reason I'm drawn to, and I can't find where she died. She died in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I was told she was murdered in a bar.
Wow.
But it was so cold that they couldn't bury her for months.
Wow.
And so I can't find the dates. I can't find anything about what happened to Margaret.
Or even
And
her
so
line.
I know her line,
Okay.
but I don't know her specific information. And it's just drives me nuts because I grew up with a dad who used to go to the family history library and write. He had a notebook and he would write all this stuff off of microfiche.
Oh.
He had books and it wasn't even people we were related to, but he didn't know if maybe someday he would find something that we needed. And so I've always had that same thing, but it was weird for me because I was adopted and I knew I was adopted into the family, but it didn't feel completely that's who I was.
Yeah, we long for connection. We long for an understanding of our origin, and I see that in many different ways being manifested today. People trying to understand who they are, and they try to find themselves. What they're really missing is some vital information, and family history is certainly one way to get that connection.
I was really just hoping that Sean Connery had come through Idaho at some point
And claimed you?
No, had created me.
Created.
So it's funny, and I'll just share this story. Then I want to talk to you about going there and maybe some of your running. My first novel, it's a man who goes to England, then goes up to Scotland, and I was just always been fascinated. Then I did the DNA test, and I am mostly Scottish.
Wait, did you do 16andMe? Is that the one you did?
Ancestry.
Ancestry.
So I found 2 kilts before Christmas. I bought 2 kilts. And so my plan is next year, end of next year, to go on a trip of my book and see how horribly I described it. Because I just made it, you just got to make up some stuff.
Hey, well, with AI, you might have nailed it.
Right. No, this is not AI. This is Kevin's imagination. So you said you went over there to do other things as well. And I mean, I think we could probably stay in your family history stuff and just be thrilled with a lot more stories.
For
but
sure.
how did the running begin for you?
I was a runner in school. In primary school, I liked cross country. I played soccer, and then in high school, I was in the cross country team, and I got to run state level. And then I took a break from that because I had a lot of other responsibilities, and so I didn't start running again not seriously until I was in my 40s, so early 40s, and then I got divorced. I left my marriage in 2016 and promptly took up triathlon and duathlon and ultra running and a bunch of other things to sort of focus some energy into something productive and useful. And I had some friends that I joined a triathlon club, and I had some friends that had represented Australia, and I go, how do you do that? And I said, you just got to go in the right kind of races and do well enough and collect enough points, and then you can apply to be in the Australian team. And I go, so I set about travelling the country, racing in cross triathlon, which is off-road triathlon. So you do a swim in a dam or a lake, and then you run a trail, and then you ride a mountain bike. Also, you ride a mountain bike and then run a trail. So this cross triathlon was something I enjoyed, and I did pretty well as an age grouper, and actually just as a participant, and sort of won a few races or podiumed on a few races, and got to be an age group champion for a couple of years in a row and the national champion. So,
Joel, can you explain what an age group champion is?
Yeah, so instead of being an elite athlete or running in the open category, you run as part of your age group.
Age group. Okay.
And so you're still part of the race with all the other open and elite athletes. And if you're good enough, then you can still podium. So I did that a couple of times in some of those races. But as an age grouper, I was racing in my category of 40 to 49-year-olds. And so I managed to win enough races or be on the podium enough times and get enough points to qualify to represent Australia in World Championships. I go, this is legit. So I then went to race in Denmark for my first experience, and then raced the next year in Spain. And then the next year was to be in the Netherlands, in Almere, but that's when COVID came along, and so
Belgium was the next year.
Belgium was the year of COVID, I bet.
Well, we had
I had
Netherlands
my trip planned for then.
twice in a row, so I re-qualified. So I qualified for 4 years in a row to race World Championships, but I only went to 2 of them because the one in Netherlands was cancelled, and then it was in Netherlands again the next year, and it was still cancelled. We couldn't leave Australia. They held it, but we couldn't go. And then the next year it was in Australia, in Queensland. I go, well, I'm from Queensland. I'm not going to go do that. So
I want to go somewhere fun if I'm going to represent my country.
That's right. So I travelled around racing around the world.
And it's always the 3: trail, swim, and bike.
So I did triathlon, and then I did duathlon, which is instead of swim, ride, run, it's a run, ride, run. So you do 2 runs.
Oh, I could do that one.
So
take away the swim and I'll do it.
Yeah, and then I did just long distance trail running, which they call ultra running, and then
How far is that?
Anywhere from a half marathon up. So a proper ultra marathon is
26
more than 30 k's.
Okay.
So 30 to 160 kilometers or more.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so
that's the ultras.
Yeah, ultras.
But like the half.
A half
be 13
marathon,
miles, and then the full will be 26.2.
Correct.
Yes, but you would do how much of the bike and how much of the run?
So when
Can you tell I'm interested? I might do this.
Yeah. So
Don't get me swimming.
there's so many different variations of these.
I'll
So
drown.
a duathlon, if you do a
Yes.
sprint version, it would be a 5-kilometer run. So it's a 3-mile run basically, and then a 20-kilometer bike ride, which is roughly 13 miles, 12 miles, and then a 2.5-kilometer run, which is
Now you're
one
at a
and a
mile and a
half.
half to finish.
Yeah. So
I
it's
could do that one.
it's hard and
Okay.
it's fast.
Let's do this.
I was a sprinter in high school.
They said it was a sprint duathlon.
Yeah, and then
Call
there's
that
the
a
next
sprint
one,
run.
which is Olympic distance, and then there's the full distance. So if you do Ironman or half Ironman, they're longer experiences, so they're more endurance. But I used to do lots of different trail ultras was one of the things that I did quite a few of, and or just half marathons was probably my specialty. So
When you have time. I mean, it still takes a lot of time, but time commitment. That's
Yeah.
what I always say for halves.
so it's just anything that was endurance,
Yeah.
running, riding, swimming,
How
those kinds
exciting.
of things. Yeah.
And brought you peace and back to where you once were, sounds like.
Yeah, so I learned a lot of things about life,
Yep.
and I made a lot of good friends, and I got to travel a lot, and I did a lot of solo traveling. So one year I decided that I wanted to go and run in epic places. So I Googled epic places to go trail running, and I made a list of 20 of them, and I booked a round the world ticket and went for 3 months.
Wow.
And just went wild and just run hiking through wilderness, taking my backpack and my ultralight tent and things and just running into a forest or a mountain and trail running, hiking and sleeping. And
I'm sorry, there's a joke there. Why do you need to buy a ticket? Wouldn't you just run around everywhere? Sorry.
Hold
I
on
had to
just
say
a
that.
second.
No. Do you happen to know a woman named Mina Gooley?
I don't know Mina Gooley.
She's an Australian, and she broke her back. And I met her in Sun Valley at an event a number of years ago. And the doctor said, you'll never be able to run again. She's like, I never ran before, but I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'll start running. So her format is, or her platform is drinkable water around the world. So she ran, I think it was 45 marathons in 50 days.
Oh my word.
And she did it on every single continent.
Yeah.
and she ran them in like places
Oh
that
yeah,
had no water.
we studied her. That's
Yeah,
right.
and there was this place in Peru where this man had a vineyard, and he had used all the water to pump up the grapes, and he used all the water that the village had, and so it was desolate. And this man lived there, and he noticed all the fog would come off the ocean. So he built these humongous like screen doors that went way up in the air, and it would collect the fog and it would drip down, and he started a farm off of the fog water. But anyway, I didn't know if you had come across her or had heard her story, but
I've
pretty
probably
interesting.
heard her story now that you mentioned that, but I don't believe I've met
And I
her.
think she tried to do 100 in 100 days, and she
Yeah,
broke a
that's
bone
what
in
it
her
was.
leg. And so everybody around the world started running marathons for her every day. So and all of a sudden she's got thousands of people running every day for her. It's kind of an interesting story.
Yeah, I like that.
And I'm going to be the history nerd here. Do you know why it's called a marathon?
No, why?
Do you?
Marathon.
I'm sure I've read it.
So there was the Greeks were
Okay.
fighting.
Mm-hmm.
There was different armies within Greece, and the people of Athens were fighting in the people of Marathon, and they beat them finally. And so they sent a soldier back to Athens to proclaim their victory, and his name was Phidippides. And he ran the 26 miles back to Athens and told them that they had won, and he collapsed and died. And then
That is so
in
awful.
the London Olympics
Is that real?
yeah, that's just true. In the
gonna look that up.
1904, the London Olympics,
Okay.
to have the marathon end at Buckingham Palace, they had to add the 300 extra yards. So that's why it's actually 26 miles and whatever
Oh, the point two?
was to get to
comes
Buckingham
from him.
Palace.
Huh.
I did
That's all
not
I'm
know
good
that.
for here.
That's
Right.
impressive.
I'm like the Cliff Clavin of the show.
Hey, you know what? If that's true, you don't see this, but we just high-fived across this podcast for Kevin. That's really
So
impressive.
where have been some of those cool places you've run?
Oh, well, Tahiti, so on an island called Maoria, and I ran across the island from one side to the other.
Oh, cool.
And that was actually quite a fun story by
That is
itself.
cool.
Do you want me to tell you that
Sure.
Wait,
story?
Holly,
Love
did
it.
you go to that with him? Okay.
So-
I was like, did she take pictures of you running like Forrest Gump?
So
I
ran across
I have all night,
the
so
island.
you tell as many stories as you feel like it.
Well, it's kind of funny because I went there and I was staying on the island of Papeete, near Papeete, and I just was in the middle of just exploring, and I met this girl at a little hostel that I was staying at. She was just a girl from France, a little nurse. She was probably 24. And I said to her one day, because I was there for a week, I said, "How are you getting around?" She says, "I just hitchhike." I go like,
You're 24.
"You hitchhike? Is that safe?" Like, and she says, "Oh, it's great." I said, "I've never hitchhiked." She said, "Tomorrow you must hitchhike." And I said, "All right, I'm going to hitchhike tomorrow." So I got up in the morning, I put my little run vest on, my little backpack, and I decided I'm going to go across on the ferry to this island called Maoria, and I'm going to run across the island from one side over the top of this volcano thing to the other side. And to get to the ferry port, I decided that I'd hitchhike. So I get out there and I'm standing on the side of the road, and I got my thumb out, nothing. Like almost half an hour goes by and I'm going
People
like,
are passing you though, right?
I've got to be a young 24-year-old girl in order to get a ride.
In order for me to get a ride, I need to be her.
So anyway, finally this one guy stops, and he doesn't speak English really well. He speaks French, and I don't speak French real well, and so we were just laughing. I said, Papeete, it's a ferry, la mer. He said, "Oh yeah, yeah,
La mer?
yeah." And so he says we go this way, and he's speaking in French, and I'm just laughing, and I'm speaking English, and he's laughing, and it would sort of get a few words of where we could understand each other, and I just thought, this is really fun, and this is my first hitchhiking experience.
I'm going to come back to the hostel and brag tonight.
So we drive along, and I'll grab my phone while I'm doing this.
Okay.
And he drops me off at the ferry port, and I had in my bag a couple of oranges. I thought, I can't just give this guy who's given me a lift for half an hour nothing. And so I decided to give him my oranges. And I know that's not how hitchhiking works, but that's how it worked for me.
Okay.
And so I gave him these oranges, and he's like, "Oh, this is so good." I said, "Can we take a picture?" "Oh, yeah." So we took a picture together, and then I got on the ferry, and I took the ferry. It's about, 45 minutes across to this island. And so I go to this island, and all of a sudden I'm going, now I've got to find my way around the island to the other side where this trail starts.
Oh, so you can't go backwards over the island. You have to start and go this way.
Yeah, because I had to come back to where the
Where
ferry
you're gonna
was.
find the ferry. Okay.
And so I get on this side of the road, and I put my thumb out, and almost the first vehicle that comes past, "Oh, you want a lift?" "Yeah." And it was an old man and an old lady.
Okay.
And they spoke English, which was really helpful. And they asked me, "Oh, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to this pineapple track around the other side of the island." "Oh, yeah, we know where that is." And what are you going to do there? I said, "I'm going to run across from there back to here." "Why?" Because
That's what I'm here for.
I want to explore the island. And so,
How long was that run?
Oh,
Kilometers?
it's a couple of hours if you do it. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
maybe 10 miles to 15 miles.
I can't even remember now, but
Okay.
it's probably nearly a half marathon.
Okay.
And anyway, so I thought I've got to get to this place. And so they said, "Oh, have you ever been to Tahiti before?" "No." "Oh, we will show you the island."
Okay.
I'm going, okay. I've got to get back to the island's ferry by 4:30, I think, because
right.
that's the last ferry for the day.
Oh, no.
So anyway, I'm cruising along and trying to find this wonderful place, but they've decided they're going to take me on a tiki tour of the island. So they take me and show me this beautiful beach. And so here's my first Uber driver, my first little guy. That was him.
That's the one you gave the oranges to?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then here's the island that I went to.
Beautiful. That's the one you crossed eventually.
Yes, and this is
Okay.
the lovely couple that gave me a
That
tour of
took
the
you
island.
tour. Oh, that's
and
so great.
showing me the beautiful beaches and things like that.
And that is gorgeous water.
And then they took me to a little restaurant and they introduced
Before
me
running.
to friends.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
And I'm
Okay.
like, okay.
Yep.
And I'm looking at the time slipping away, and then I'm going like, oh, well, I did ask for a ride and they have been very kind.
You can't say
Anyway,
no.
so I eventually get to this place, and so I'm running. And in Tahiti, it rains practically every day. So it's volcanic atolls and things. So I'm up on this mountain. I'm going up and up and up. And I'm going, I don't really exactly know where I'm going, but I know that I've just got to go over the top and then down, because it's kind of a circle-shaped island. And there's a ring road that goes all the way around it. So I get over the top and I come down the other side, and I'm looking at my watch and going, oh, there's no way I'm going to make it back to the ferry by the time the last ferry goes. So I just went, I've just got to keep going. I'm committed now. I'll just sleep on the beach or something. So
This is not what a 24-year-old nurse could do, but
no. So anyway, I got down, and as I'm coming down through the mountain, I see this kind of farm area, and I came out of the forest, and I've got no shirt on. And I've just been running through the forest. It's been raining, and it's muddy, and I'm just sort of this muddy, shirtless guy running through the forest. And then I come, and there's a little road, and I go, oh, there's a little road here. This is good. So I start running down this farm road through this banana plantation kind of thing, and then all of a sudden there's a four-wheel drive that comes up the road towards me, and I'm running towards it, and we're going like this, and this guy in the vehicle, he's looking at me going like,
what are you doing?
what is this? Like, who are you? Where are you come
Where
from?
did you come from? Yes.
And so he stops and he looks at me, his window's down, and I say to him, La mer?
I missed the La Mer.
I'm trying to find the ocean, like the sea. Where's the sea? La mer, this way? Yes. And I go, cool, ciao. And then I run past. He's like, I don't know what that was, but he kept driving, and I ran that way. And I eventually got to this long straight road, because in this island there's big long straight roads that go from the ring road up, and there's people's houses off to the side. And I get to the end of this road, and there's an LDS chapel at the end of the road. I go, oh, I know what that is. My daughter had served her mission in Tahiti, so she'd served on that particular island, which is how I knew about it. And so I think, oh, maybe they'll know my daughter that when she lived here. And so I run in there because I'm trying to figure out, do I have to turn left or right from where I am to get to the ferry, because I'd lost my bearings. And anyway, so I see these people doing a cleaning at the chapel, and so I run in there, and I've still got no shirt on, and I'm just carrying this stuff, and they're looking at me like, oh, like, what is this? And so I asked this guy, I said, you speak English? And he said, yes. I said, oh, good. Which way is the ferry? This way or this way? It's a long way. Oh, okay, it's okay. But is it this way or this way? It's a long way, no more ferry. And I said, I know the last ferry's gone, but is it that way to the ferry or this way? It's a long way. And I go, all right, I get it, that's a long way. And I said, I'm just trying to get there. Why do you want to get there? I said, because I need to get back to the other island. And he says, no more ferry. I said, yes. He says, what will you do? I said, I sleep on the beach. He says, no. And I go, no what? No sleep on the beach. Okay, well, I have to go that way anyway, so I'll figure it out. He says, you wait here. And anyway, he figured out that I was a member, and I tried to show him a picture of my daughter. No, don't remember her. And so he comes back and he says, you wait. And I said, okay. And then what? And someone will come get you. Oh, okay. And what will they do? They will take you. Oh, to the ferry? No. Oh. Anyway, so I waited, and some people came and picked me up and drove me to a house. And he said, the man and the lady said, you will stay here tonight.
Wow.
Okay. So this is the family whose house I stayed in.
Wow.
They took me to some members of the church, and they gave me a place to sleep. They let me sleep in their bed while they slept on the couch, and they gave me a meal. And that was the funny thing, because before I could have any food, I had to have a shower. I was all filthy.
Sure.
And so this man is a little bit more rotund than I am, and so he comes and brings me some shorts and a t-shirt to wear, and the shorts were way too big, and so I'm holding them up like this, and I come out of the bathroom and they're just all laughing.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to eat food. Yeah, okay. So
lot
then
of food.
they gave me a lot of food, and then took me the next day to the ferry and bought me a new ticket that's on the fast ferry so I could get back sooner. And that was my first hitchhiking experience.
Yeah,
so that was one of the cool places
you
I
met
went.
so many people. What a wonderful country. What a wonderful islanders.
It was
Just
beautiful.
kindness.
Honestly, it was just one of those fun things. And so yeah, that's me running around the island.
Survived.
I was totally expecting you to get back, and the guy that you gave the oranges to was like an orange vendor. That's what I was. That's what I was.
The
thinking
same
was
guy.
gonna
I
happen.
thought that
Yeah.
the same guy picked you up when he saw you. Like, get back in.
You know, I have a friend. She and her dad were going to Ireland for vacation. And he called the church and talked to someone there, and it was just asking some basic questions. And they're like, "Hey, when you get here, just come over." And they took them for the week. They let them stay in their house, and they took them around and showed them everything. So
The kindness of strangers is a thing, and I've been very fortunate, very blessed many times in my travels to enjoy the kindness of strangers. So yeah, it's been quite rewarding in that way.
Someone's looking out for you. You didn't get eaten by scorpions or something on the sand.
I did not. It was good. So that was one wild place that I went.
That's impressive.
have you ran through Scotland at all?
I haven't been through Scotland, no, but
You can
Scotland's
come with
on
me next year.
my list of places to go.
Joel, do you still run?
Yeah.
Does Holly, do you guys run together?
We run together.
You do.
I just recently bought a treadmill, put it in my garage, and put a heater in there so I could go in there and do a little bit more. I'm not very much in shape as much as I usually would be. I've been adjusting to the loss of my crew and darkness. That's long in winter time, and it's colder. And you know, in Brisbane, I could run in winter without a shirt on, which is what I mostly would do. And yeah, I have had the benefit of a lot of people that I could go train with and structure. And over here, I haven't set that up yet. Built myself a crew and organised training with clubs and different groups. And so my motivation has suffered a little bit, but I've booked myself into some hard races this year to do something to kickstart that again. So, yeah, but I still love to run for sure.
So then that brings me to this, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one here that doesn't know this, but so you haven't been in Boise, Idaho for very long.
Just
what
over
does
2
that
years.
look like? 2 years. Okay, so in 2023, 22, 20.
23.
Okay, and what brought you here?
A beautiful woman.
So Holly brought you here?
Correct.
I love it. Now we get to hear this story. We have to. We have to hear this story.
It's a long. We should do the cliff notes.
Okay, but Holly, were you in Australia when you met him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's hear the cliff notes.
No, we met here.
You met here in Boise?
In Provo.
In Provo. Oh, that's right, next to the
Yeah,
new
he was living in
skin.
Australia.
Yeah.
We did meet here.
But you met there.
You were
And,
living
like-
in Australia?
No, he was in Australia, and I was actually here in
Yeah.
Idaho.
And are you from Boise or are you from Idaho? Where are you
I'm
from?
originally from Virginia, but I've lived here.
Virginia.
Mhm.
The state of lovers.
It is.
It is.
Yep.
That's what Virginia's for.
Maybe
I
I have
didn't
to
know
move
that.
to Virginia sometime.
The state of lovers.
Yeah,
Virginia
the state of
is for
lovers.
lovers. I think is the
Yeah, and there's bumper,
bumper
stickers. And
Oh.
my sister lived there for a time, but was a nanny there when we were younger. So I got to go visit her there. It was beautiful. I love the
Yeah.
colonial and all the
Yeah, it's
architecture.
very different.
And
Yes.
the smell of leaves and the sound of
Yes.
birds.
Yes.
Yes, they have a
Humidity.
longer. Oh yeah, humidity. No, I wouldn't do that part. But yeah, 'cause
Humidity.
you have to have
I
like
love humidity.
in the homes. You have to have different inspections there because of the humidity on the wood and the foundations, and
Yeah.
might have termites, like all of those things. We don't have those here.
Mm.
Keep them away. Okay, so you're from Virginia.
Yeah.
You were from Australia. You were running your life into like sanity and travels, and then you meet Holly in Provo, Utah.
I do.
Let's hear.
And that's why I didn't go to Belgium.
We're all gonna go later. Don't worry, because I can feel it. Like I need to get there. We're all going.
Belgium and Denmark were on my list of places to go, and,
In
and France
23.
in
Okay.
2022.
Okay.
So I had a friend, a French couple.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting married. They live in Australia. They're Australian citizens now, but they were going to go back to France to get married. So they'd asked if I could come to their wedding. And they were training partners of mine in my triathlon club. And I had another friend who's also French, but she'd moved to Denmark, and she was my main training partner. And so she'd moved to Denmark for work. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to go to their wedding in France, then I might as well go see my friend Nellie in Denmark, and then another friend in Belgium. But at that time, the airfare situation was pretty horrendous, and it would have almost doubled my ticket to do the Europe part and then still come to the US, because I had some things to do in the US for a month. And so I was going to be 2 weeks in Europe, and then I thought, well, my friends, they'll get married in France, they're going to video the wedding. I can see it when I get back and when they get back. And my friend Nellie, she's going to go to St. George, Utah for the half Ironman World Championships. And so I'd promised, because she was my training partner, that I'd see her race in St. George. So I said, I don't need to go to Denmark then, because I'm
she'll
going
be
to
coming
see
here
her in
to
the
St.
US.
George.
And then my friend in Belgium, I go, well, that's just going to have to be, sorry, sayonara, I'll try another
Some
time.
other time.
So I ended up making my trip to the US 6 weeks, which made my trip a lot cheaper and meant that I could come here a little bit earlier than I was originally planning to be here. So when I was coming here, I thought, I'm going to go do some wilderness experiences. I'm going to do some national parks and trail running. I'm going to go and visit some Australian friends who live in the US, and I'm going to go visit the 2 people whose names I bear. So my parents joined the church, and they named me after the 2 missionaries that baptized them.
Wow.
So one is named Joel Barrett, and he happens to be an Idahoan, and the other one is David Osborne, and he's a Utahn. They both live in Utah now. So I was going to go visit them, go to visit some other friends that had moved from Australia to here, and trail running and a bunch of other things. So I had a little list of things that I wanted to get done, some races that I was doing as well. And so I thought, it'd be fun to do something with somebody. So I put on an LDS dating app. I'm going to be here and here and here. Anyone that wants to come along.
You both roll your eyes. I'm glad. I'm so glad.
They're not very good, honestly. It was a horrendous experience being on that. So many scammers and so many fake profiles and things. Anyway, so I was trying to delete.
Resume of fakeness.
I was trying to delete my account actually,
Okay.
and in the process of doing that, it got stuck and I couldn't do it for more than a month. I was trying to delete it. And this is really dumb. Anyway, in that process, I actually saw Holly's profile, and I thought, I don't really know where Boise, Idaho is, and so I'm not going to Idaho, and so I thought that's probably
But then you
a bit
saw
pointless.
Utah and Idaho is so close.
They are, but I'd never planned to go to Idaho in my whole life, and it wasn't on my list of things to do. So
not Belgium.
it wasn't.
It's close, but nope.
Yeah.
I love Idaho.
So
Stacks of potatoes.
Yeah, it's
It's
great.
so much more than potatoes. Look out the window right now, everybody. Look to
Yeah.
your left or to your right.
Wonderful. So anyway, I thought Idaho. Well, I'm not going to go there. So if she's going to meet me, then she's got to come to where I am.
Wow.
So-
There's parameters, Holly.
Yeah, well,
Halfway.
I mean, I looked at the pictures that she'd put up there, and I thought, and I think that was my comment to her. I said, "You look like a happy. Your children look happy, and you look like a happy woman." I said, "I like that." And anyway, I just
And then
we
you downloaded
connected.
all the pictures and saved them. This is the happy woman with happy children.
But I thought, she looks like she goes outside, and she looks like she is smart and fun. And so I go, well, that's good. Maybe if she wants to come to some of these things that I'm doing, then she can come along. So I invited her, and
Wow.
it turns out that we were going to go to music and the spoken word together in the Tabernacle in Salt Lake.
Very good place to meet. Yes,
So-
early in the morning on Sundays, right?
Yeah, so that was the only connection that we were going to have
Okay.
in my whole trip. And it turns out after 4 days of being so I was going to meet her after 2 weeks, the end of 2 weeks, so 14 days in. And
Of
so-
your 6 weeks.
Of my 6
Okay.
weeks. So that was scheduled. And after 4 days, I was driving from California up into Utah to go to Salt Lake to stay at my friend's house. And I had to stop and have a business meeting online. And the closest place where I could stop, which was kind of comfortable, was Provo. And I got there and I said, so I just messaged Holly. I said, I'm just stopping in Provo for this business meeting and I'm going to be in Salt Lake and just confirming we're still good. She says, actually, I'm in Provo right now. I go,
Wow.
oh. So I think I said something to the effect of, well, I'll lay my cards on the table and we can either meet tonight or we can meet in 2 weeks when we were supposed to meet. And she says, well, if we meet today, it'll have to be late. I
Did
said,
you take him to that, what is that specialty place where you can get the really tall ice cream cones? Do you know what I'm talking about in
even
Provo?
better.
I'm not even.
No, it was worse than that.
It was.
It
okay.
was.
Well, because you said it was something with like New Skin. So
Yeah, it was right
did
next
you meet
door.
out in the like
Well-
parking lot of New Skin and?
We met in the parking lot of the Provo City Centre Temple at 10:15 p.m.
Oh, at night.
Yes.
Okay. Well, at least you're in a safe place,
Well,
right?
yeah, it's still
that you think.
Yeah, so
It's, who do you meet at 10:15 at night?
Yeah, that's true
It's
for the
kinda-
first time on the temple grounds. Uh huh.
yeah. So that was a safe place in my mind because I thought, well, that's where I'd parked just around the corner from that to have my meeting. I was just sitting outside the front of the Dry Bar Comedy Club, actually.
Oh, so you were there late too? Like you
Yeah.
pulled in late?
My meeting was online at 6 p.m.
Okay. Okay.
So because it was with people back in Australia and some in
time shift.
Middle East. So I that was just when we'd scheduled to meet. So 6 p.m. And so I go, well, I've got a meeting at 6 p.m. And she says, well, I can't meet you till 10:15 p.m. I go, that's an oddly specific late hour, but nevertheless, I'll go with that.
Cheers. I'm a late night girl too. Did you see that in my pictures?
So I said, okay, great. Well, I'll go do a temple session then, and then we'll meet you in the car park at the temple. So that's what I did, and I scouted out a place to take her. I thought, I've got to make a good impression if I'm going to meet this lady. And before I'd come, I knew I was going to meet her, so I'd brought something with me from Australia. I brought a little Aboriginal design fold-up bag, like a shopping bag thing that you
I thought he was going to use the sales pitch that he said on his dad's painting.
no.
Before you look at this.
And some chocolate
you're gonna
covered
wanna buy it.
macadamia nuts.
Oh, perfect.
And so I go, these are Queensland nuts, that macadamia nut's called a Queensland nut. And so I brought something from home that I could give as a little thank you for meeting a random dude somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
But that's sweet, just so you know. Like, that's heartfelt.
Oh, well.
Girls like that stuff. At least I like that stuff.
So
Thoughtful.
that was my thought. And so I was trying to scout out a place to take her, and I saw across the road from the temple, and there's this little, it said it was an ice cream shop, but it said it had sorbet, and I go, I love sorbet, because when I travel through Europe, that's what I eat most of, go and get a gelato a couple of times a day. And
You're on the show for a reason.
100%.
Gelato before breakfast, ice cream
it's a
before
thing,
breakfast.
so-
We got this.
Ice cream after dinner.
It's
No, before.
Ice cream before.
just any time, really.
Really anytime when you're running
there's
on
no
the
rules
beach.
about gelato, and so
No
I saw
rules.
the sign at this shop and go, it says gelato. I go, all right, I'm down for that, and I didn't actually walk inside, which was a mistake. But it had on the outside, it was kind of this thing where they infuse some nitrogen into whatever they're making, and all this smoke comes out, and you go like, oh, that looks pretty cool. I don't know what it tasted like, but that's what I thought. I'll take Holly there. It's open till
Nitrogen
a
infused.
little later.
Fabulous dessert.
So we met in the car park, and then I take her to this place. It was just your little ice machine over there.
Yeah.
It was just someone scooping some of that out, putting it in a blender and making it smaller ice pieces.
Where's the
and then
nitrogen?
pouring cordial over the top of it, and like syrupy stuff. And
Like an Italian soda or
and then
icy.
they infuse this nitrogen in there, and I'm going like, what does that even do? Nothing.
It was in a
Was it
metal
a 7-Eleven? Was it a Slurpee at 7-Eleven?
It was-
No, it wasn't even that good.
The Provost Slurpee.
It was in a metal bowl, and the ice.
Wow.
Yeah,
The
so if
butter
they're
stuff,
listening to this
so it was-
podcast, I'm dissing on them.
We are
But
not saying the name of your business, but when we talk
can't
about
even-
aluminum bowls, nitrogen, and ice, you know what we're talking
across
about.
the road
Provo.
from the temple. Yeah, sorry guys, but that was just horrendous.
Horrible first date.
I had to throw mine away. Holly was going like, well, actually, I'm thirsty, so it's okay. And I'm like, she's eating the ice.
so
to be,
accommodating. You're like, good.
yeah,
Gold
so
star.
tick for that. Anyway, we stayed talking until 2:15 in the morning.
10 to 2. Good for you.
And so 4 hours of chatting, and it was effortless. And I just was impressed with that, because I came out of a marriage that was actually horrendous, and I'd resolved that I didn't want to marry again, because I didn't want to be vulnerable with a woman in that way. And just to have that experience with Holly helped change my perspective on, actually, this is quite good. So ultimately, out of my 6 weeks, I ended up in Boise twice for a week at a time.
wow.
And so instead of seeing my friend Nellie race in St. George, where I picked her up in Vegas and we drove up and set her up in a hotel, and I said, Nellie, I've got this situation where it's kind of dynamic and fluid, and
Send me the video of you crossing the finish line. I gotta go to Boise.
and she says, it's a half Ironman. I'm going to be swimming for 40 minutes, and then I'm going to be riding for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and then I'm going to be running for
Yes.
2 hours. You're not going to see me.
Yes.
And I go, well, that's fair. And she said, and it's going to be raining that day, so don't worry.
Aw,
You go up to Boise.
go to
So
Boise.
I said, well, I'll give you my truck, and I'll give you my national park pass, and you can go explore Zion or Bryce or whatever for the week. And if you pick me up at the airport at the end, that'll be great. That's what we did. So I ended up coming up to see Holly for the second time. So after only 1 month of knowing her and spending time virtually and sometime in person, we were sitting in the temple, actually in Boise, and I had the distinct impression that I needed to ask this woman to marry me right there in that place. And I had this little conversation in my head, and I go, if I do that, instantly my whole world will change, and so will hers. And is that a good thing or not? And it just was clear, you need to do that. And so I said, Holly, I'm going to do a thing.
You did not say it like that. He did. He said, I'm going to do a thing. Okay. And this is after the temple session, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we're in this beautiful room in the middle of the temple, and I'd already used that phrase with her once before, and she knew what that meant. And so I said, Holly, will you marry me? And she surprisingly said, yes, I will. And I went, okay, I guess I'm moving to America.
Wow.
But there's a lot of other parts to that which were in fact miraculous, and other things that happened since then. And just to, I guess, highlight one of those, we wanted to get married in Nauvoo, in the temple there, which the original temple burnt to the ground.
Yep.
A beautiful place, in a place called Beautiful, and it burnt to the ground, something holy and special. And I felt like my first marriage burnt to the ground. And so I like the symbolism of Nauvoo, and it got rebuilt. And it's as spectacular, probably maybe more so than it was originally. And we decided that we would marry on April the 6th as another symbol of restoration, and in a place that had been restored. And so those, you'll know that I'm a person who loves metaphor and stories. And so I wanted that to be part of our story, that we'd come from something that was supposed to stand but didn't, but then was renewed and restored. And so as a beginning of our life together, I thought there's no more fitting place than Nauvoo on the 6th of April. And so we did that.
Was that a Saturday?
Because it was Thursday.
A Thursday.
And it happened to be Passover weekend.
Wow. And you're working on... I wrote it
And so
down,
as
like
our
a dog.
wedding dinner, we did Passover.
Oh.
And with 35 members of our family, my family came from across the world, some friends that come, some friends who live in the US now in Iowa, came along to that as well, and Holly's family. And when we were booking the place to stay, we needed a place that would fit a lot of people. But the number of people kept growing, so we booked this place that could hold 24 people. And then a couple of months later, Holly's sister-in-law says, well, there's actually more people now. Maybe we will just do a house for all of Joel's family and then a house for all of Holly's family. So we'll book another place, and then we can just sort of gather in one of them and do what we do. And so she booked a house, and it turns out we got there first. So we got to our little house, and we were on the phone to the other families going, so where's the house that you guys are staying in? They said, oh, it's on this street. And go, that's the same street that we're in. What's the number of the house? And it's this one. It happened to be the exact next door house. The houses look identical, except they're different colours. Inside they're the same. And so as another symbol of the joining of two houses, it was just a little, in my mind, another little tender mercy, if you will, where we're saying, hey, this is the connection of two people from literally opposite sides of the world that I have brought together.
Absolutely.
And it was just so many spectacular things like that.
Yeah, there's multiple. I mean, it's one of those things where you can't deny God's hand, and so as that happens, you just you're on the right path.
You're in Provo. I don't even... Let's stop right here and just... Why were you in Provo anyway for that?
Yeah, so my dad was sick, and he was in the hospital, and so I needed to take a shift to sit with my dad in the hospital. My sisters and my mom had been doing that. It was my turn. I needed to do that. I had a couple days off from work, and just made a quick trip, and
wow.
Yeah, so that's why I had to wait till 10:15. So
yeah,
when hospital visiting hours were finished. So yeah.
So yeah, it was very interesting because I was the same as Joel. I wasn't going to get married again. So anyway, it was interesting. That's a big
But I've learned through my life, through my travels, through my family history research, through meeting Holly and moving here, God is in the details of every single person's life. And I mentioned before about the tapestry that he weaves. He's a master weaver. He's an artist. You just have to look around the beautiful world that we live in. You go, God is an artist. He's obviously got feminine influence in his life because there's lots of beauty. But in all the different experiences that I've had in so many different places, I can see where I've been placed, or people have been placed in my way. And it has meaning, and it has significance, and it has purpose beyond just the moment. And sometimes you don't get to know what that purpose is until a long time later. And we had a little visit just recently with a couple that I met when I was a missionary. And in 1989, 1990, when I served my mission in Sydney, this couple from Clearfield, Utah, had been sent to Australia. The wife, her family had come from Australia, but she was an American. But so they wanted to serve in Australia, their mission, and they got sent to Sydney mission. And I met them there, and we lived next door to each other for a few months and had a great relationship. And in my mission annual, they'd written, "See you in Clearfield one day."
No way.
And that was in the 1990, 1991, whenever they wrote that. And I'd never been to Clearfield, Utah. I didn't have any plans to do that. But a couple of years ago, or a year ago now, wasn't it? We went down to see Holly's family in Provo and Ogden, and I thought, I wonder if they're still in Clearfield, Utah, because we drive right through Clearfield on the way down. And so I Googled, thinking, because I had some photographs of them that I wanted to put on Family Search, thinking they'd be long dead, because it was 30-something years ago. So I was trying to find them on Family Search. No, but I Googled, and it turns out that they live in exactly the same house that they lived in when they went on their mission, which the address and phone number was in my mission annual. So I go, I'm going to try that. I'm going to give that phone number a call and see if they'd answer.
The landline.
So, yep, they don't have mobile phones still. Wow. And so I call this number, and this little old lady's voice, I said, "Is that Esther Thompson?" And she says, "Yes." I said, "This is Joel Hillier." She took a moment and goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Is Grant there?" "Yes." And so she went and got her husband Grant, and he gets on the phone. He's now 90 or 91 or something. And I go, "This is wild." I said, "I'm going to come and visit you.
I'm going to park in your parking lot."
And so
Your driveway.
We drove there, Holly and I, and visited this beautiful couple that I'd met a long time. I took my mission annual with me, and I took some photos with me of them and me together, and I opened it up. I said, "You see what that says, Grant? See you in Clearfield one day. Today's that day."
You guys have that picture, right?
Okay. Yeah, so we took photos together of me then with them outside our flat, and then me then with them outside their house. Just cool. So many fun little things like that where you go, the people we meet are important, and they're not important because they're important in what they do in their life, but they're important because they're a person.
God put them in your life or in your path for a reason.
He did. And one of those other missionaries that I met on my mission that I served with in one of my zones, he wasn't my companion. His name is Kent Roberts. And fast forward another 30 years, and Holly says, "I've got to take my information down to my accountant." Okay, so we drive to the accountant, who happens to be Kent Roberts, the same guy that I met on my mission all those years ago, again, who I've got photos with. He's been her accountant for 20 years. And I go, how does all of that happen? Like, I didn't know that I was going to live in Boise, Idaho in the future, and I didn't know that Kent would be an accountant for the woman who I'm going to marry in 2023. And so many things like that have happened, and it just, I get astonished, but I don't. I just get more humble and thankful that there's someone who's designing the experiences that we have in real time, but also long time in advance. So we never really should worry about what's happening in our life. We should just be going, what can I see? Who can I see? How do I need to be so that I can be what I need to be for the people that are in my way? And I've had so many transformative, I'll say, experiences learning how to leverage that understanding, that it's such a rich source of my life experience now that I value them more and more every time they happen, and they happen more and more frequently.
We should never worry. I like that you just said that.
You shouldn't. No matter what's happening in your life, I've had some hard things happen, but I can't say that I would have gotten here today in such favourable circumstances that I find myself without having first gone through those things. And so this Haggadah project, if I circle back to that, the Exodus story, the Passover story, where we leave behind things that we don't need anymore, that were useful for a time to give us experience, but God wants to show us, I have something better in a promised land for you. I have something that you can't even begin to imagine is so good. It's there for you. You just have to trust me and follow. If you want to spend 40 years in the wilderness, I'll let you, but that's not what I want for you. But if that's what it takes for you to learn that you have to ultimately trust me to get to the promised land, then that's what it'll take. And so I've felt that Exodus story be my reality more and more every day. And so that's why I say don't worry, because if you're listening and you're trying to follow what God wants for your life, then you will get such spectacular, wondrous, miraculous things happen for you that you can't even know yet until you get there. And then you'll go, wow.
Remarkable. Yeah, remarkable. Both of you.
So when we started this, I said something about Joel was an amazing person, and I think that having been here with you, you're the reason we do this.
Exactly.
To hear your stories. This is exactly why we want to do this. And I don't want to cut it off short because I've got all night, but we don't want to take up all your time either. So it's been fascinating, unless you want to keep going.
No, I can
You could
feel.
keep going.
I am
Great
impressed.
stories.
Well, maybe.
Well, and we want you to feel like Boise becomes home, but we get it. Like those are also part of the. I'm assuming you're in a totally different. You called it land. Yeah, it's a totally different land.
Yeah.
And people and experiences and
Well, it's hard too. I mean, his mom and his children.
children.
Yeah, that's a.
Are they
really
adult?
hard-
All of your children are adult children. What's your age group from oldest to youngest?
My eldest daughter, Emma, is 32,
Okay.
and my youngest son, Andre, is 26.
So 32 to
20.
26.
Yeah, he'll be 26 this year.
Okay. And then what about your children, Holly?
So 30 to 16.
To 16. So you still have
One.
at home. And I'm assuming they're at Mountain View High School?
Rocky.
Rocky. Okay.
Yeah.
That's where my son graduated.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
I'm
excited.
sure there's a story there somewhere. They know each other or something.
I know, you never know. Yeah.
So I mean, it's tricky. I mean, it's
Yeah,
trying
blending
to blending in a certain way, but just trying to keep relationship, and it's
Yep.
time difference is a factor, and
Right, to contact.
Mhm.
Yep.
yeah. So it's Anyway, so there's a lot.
Right. Well, I hope I can extend my friendship to you too. I'm fascinated and touched and have felt the warmth that you bring, both of you. Holly, you didn't speak much, but I can read people, and I am just amazed by both of you and your challenges, but also the beauty that you found. Like, you've touched my heart. Like, there's so many things that I'm like, yep, that's me. Yes, I got to focus on this. I could do better. I don't know that I'll be able to swim in a triathlon, but I could do a duathlon if I could run, bike, and run. So maybe we should start that club. I'll give you some places to go if you want to start Are you doing Roby Creek?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that's the hardest one. If you can do that, maybe next year, but that's a hard half marathon.
Yes, I've heard that.
So what's next, other than your book? What are kind of some other things you want to accomplish?
Yeah, so I'm finalising a PhD this year. So I'll graduate in September in Austria, and which is kind of fun as well because my family is Austro-Hungarian German background. So it'll be going back to places of family origin again for that. So that's a fun thing for this year that I'm looking forward to finalising. I've got this little Haggadah book which I want to finish by Passover, so Easter time, so that I can give that as a gift to my family and share that with whoever wants to do it. I've got some other personal projects that I want to do. My grandfather, my mother's father, is a very fascinating man, and he designed the Berlin Olympic Stadium. But he worked as a Jew under a false name for Hitler directly through a German firm. And when Hitler found out that a Jewish man had designed his Olympic Stadium, he was absolutely furious, and hence my grandparents exited the country relatively rapidly not long after that. So there's some stories there in that part of my family history that I want to explore. I've just this year decided that it would be fun to write a screenplay of his life, because my mother wrote a book, a 500-odd page book of his life. He had a photographic memory, and so he sat down and recorded his life story on an audio cassette at my father's invitation, and we have now 9 CDs of him talking through from him being a child with dates and places and names and experiences and so forth, right up until he died in his 93rd year. So a lot of stories there, and I just thought it would be fun to create a movie script with his story as a centerpiece, designing that stadium, working for Hitler.
It would be. I wanted to do it too.
So I have a friend, Lindsay Hadley, who is a filmmaker in Utah, and so she's another person that's a fascinating person, very influential in the movie industry. But she does filmmaking for stories of purpose, for cultural change, and so I've connected with her in the last few months to talk about some other projects for somebody else and some things that she's doing. But I'm trying to think about prepping up a screenplay that I could share with her and say, how about this as a story, and about anti-Semitism and about struggles under duress. And there's lots of Jewish war stories that are out there.
People still want more. I mean, you have a direct contact.
Yeah, and I'm the grandchild. I've personal interaction with the subject, and so that's just another little family history passion project that I want to explore. And Holly and I are going to go travelling again to Europe this year. Last year we went and took my younger daughter Leah, and her younger daughter Olivia to 5 European countries, and we did a race in Switzerland called the Swiss International Mountain Marathon, which is a 2-day high altitude orienteering race. You carry all your tent and clothes and hydration and food and things on your back, and you have to navigate with a compass and a map.
It's survival.
It was a fun experience. There's
just the two of you with the girls, or just the two of you?
The four of us. Yeah, we did it as a team, and it was. There was some stories around that as well, but it's just those sorts of things. So we've got some travel plans for this year, and just trying to do good in the world. There's. I don't know, I just turned 55 in December, and that's become more and more a thing that I want to incorporate into my life. what good can I do somewhere?
Leave your mark.
Yeah, not so much to leave a mark, but just to feel the satisfaction of leaving things better than I found them, or leaving people better than I found them, and doing that more one-on-one rather than at wholesale scale. And that to me means more than money or more than a lot of other things that perhaps people aspire to. Just to have experience, to live large, if you will, and to, in living large, bring other people along in that experience to share the good things that I have. So, yeah, that's...
You were talking about how the Jewish people had kind of found themselves kind of sequestered in their little spaces, and there's a great book, I can't remember the name of it, but it was written by a boy in England. On one side of the street lived the Christians, and on the other side lived the Jews, and they wouldn't mix. But the Christians knew that the Jewish people couldn't do certain things on certain days, and they would literally just go into their house and do them for them. It was kind of this interesting story how they kind of just knew their religions, and they would go like they couldn't start a fire or there was something, and so they would go in their house and start a fire for them on a certain day. But the man who wrote the book was a little boy who was on the Christian side of the street, and just how they existed together but didn't try to mingle together.
Yeah, and I resonate with those kinds of things. When I first was coming to meet those cousins in California, in Chicago, in Illinois, and then in DC area, I wanted to give them something as a connecting piece. And so I wrote a poem actually about the Jewish experience as a way to sort of merge our shared history. Even though I'm now Christian and they're still Jewish, I just wanted to sort of recognise what we came from, and that our families of origin, many of them perished in war, and the ones that ended up in the US, in California particularly, escaped after some really significant harsh treatment at the hands of Nazis. And so I just wanted to respect that for them, and I wrote a little poem about that, which maybe it's a good way to sort of conclude. Let's see if I can find that. So it's called I Am Me, and it sort of speaks to what you just said about, Christians on this side and the Jews on this side, and they lived together, but they couldn't really interact. And so it's a little bit long, but I'll give it a go. How's that? It's called I Am Me. So I wrote this in 2017. Okay. We sat around our evening meal, the room aglow and warm, no spectre yet of coming days, a calm before the storm. That night we all remember well, when soldiers harsh and rude came bursting through our humble door, schnell, schnell, du schmutzig Jude. Out on the street are roughly pushed, not knowing what will be, for all around the self-same thing is all that we can see. How is this so, I wonder why, such awful night in pain, as through the dark wend Jewish kin to board some deathly train. The ride is long, no seats to ease a wearied, worried child, or aged legs that hardly stand, that night that no one smiled. Arriving at a appointed place, we file out in the dark, then stand in fear of horrid men and dogs with piercing bark. Each is guided where to go, some here and others there. No chance to whisper fond goodbye, just watch with longing stare. The starkness of reality this new life brings to view, in contrast with the one we left, can scarce believe it's true. The yellow star of David each wears upon their sleeve reminds us of our common hope, but seems the guard to peeve. Again I wonder how it is that just because of race a former friend can quickly turn with anger in his face. Am I not still the same as he, although of different birth? Just recently we sat as friends and shared a little mirth. This rancid place is hard to bear. The days are passing by, but fewer seem to want to live, and most would rather die. A wish that quickly comes to pass, for many here will go, to shed their mortal fragments of this life they've come to know. In sorrow many years we lived, 'neath Pharaoh's mighty hand, no matter 1,000 years before or in another land. Our people have so long endured a heavy load of care, but in the sanctum of the heart can nothing bring to bear. For truly can no worldly means alter truths that be, and nothing ever takes away the fact that I am me. Despite the harsh extremity of life within these walls, inside myself I choose to be, far from the haunting calls. But if I live or die 'tis naught, a fairer day I'll see, so long as I my slate have cleaned and made a better me.
Wow. Well written.
Hmm.
You didn't use AI for that, right?
I did not.
Yes. That was impressive. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So, yeah, we've all got a story though, you know, and some people's is more complicated and some people's is not, but everyone's is important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
And we appreciate you sharing yours with us tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you both for coming.
All right.
Well done.
That's the end of tonight's episode.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
See you next time.
Signing off.